Welcome to my world history notes, where I share with you things that I'm learning and have learned about history. And this is not polished or professional. There's a place for that. There's lots of really good um, videos out there by people who've done a great work, and looks really good and sounds good. A lot of information. But what I'm doing is sharing with you things that just astound me. Some things I knew, some things I thought I knew, some things I'd never heard of, and they directly impact us today. And I'm going to talk. We're going to talk about the beginning of the Cold War today. I want to go over some things with you, though. Now you can see by my last episode how complicated the Cold War was, and how amazed that I am by the information I'm learning and sharing that I had no idea before. As I stumbled in shock through the last one, talking about the Japanese who stayed behind and fought for both sides in the Chinese Civil War, I have to tell you, the information I learned really made me wonder at the nuances of foreign policy between the US and China, Japan and China, and Japan and China and Taiwan over the years. But more on all that later as we get to it. Today, I want to start with a personality who I only just learned about in the past year, but who had a profound impact and continues to have a profound impact on our lives and politics today. He was not a communist per se, not a member of the party, or not a active communist, but he was a Marxist in his thinking, and his link with today goes right through the OSS. He was a member of the OSS. He worked for our government. That's the precursor to the CIA, and he worked in the propaganda department, which was called the Office of War Information. He was a postmodernist and Marxist philosopher named Herbert Marcuse. Now, Herbert Marcuse was of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. He went on to write books that were very instrumental in bringing about radical change and revolution in the US and other Western countries, like France. He wrote Eros and Civilization, a critique of Freud, which I've read. He wrote The One Dimensional Man, which I'm reading now, which led to a great many of of thinking in the 60s that we had in this country, and like I said, in France, places like France, where there was a great deal of student unrest. Now, Marcuse represented um, a leftist ideal where the workers had failed. The workers did not create a revolution. They did not try to create a dictatorship of the proletariat, because the workers in the West were relatively prosperous, and they had the ability to prosper and to succeed. There was just not the desire for revolution. So what Marcuse did was he began to focus on disenchanted groups within the West, to use them in place of the class struggle, to use them as the basis for socialist revolution. Um, he inspired the radical environmental movement. Now, I'm not talking about people who want to stop pollution. I'm talking about what has resulted in this climate change thing, where um, governments simply want more control over every aspect of your life. It's not just about stopping pollution and waste and damaging the environment, but it's about global governance. He also was he motivated civil rights leaders. You take Angela Davis, the Black Panthers. Angela Davis talks about him being a prime motivator. When he worked at University of California, Berkeley, you had a lot of campus radicals when they fought against the Vietnam War, the relaxation of our traditional morality, actually a fight against it. You have, even today, you have Christians shacking up, living together, because how is that okay when it wasn't before? Well, you can thank in large part, in part anyway, Herbert Marcuse, who's now Herbert Marcuse was considered the father of the New Left. Now, in the 60s, 1960s, 20 years after World War II, there were liberals, still reformers, people who wanted reform, to change the system, to make it fair, equal opportunity for all. People had been disenfranchised and weren't considered part of the system, or being able to participate in the benefits of the capitalist or Western democracy system. But there were also, what he created were the New Left, which were radicals. They were revolutionaries. They wanted to tear down the structures, tear down the institutions, level them to the ground, and start over in their own version of utopia. And that new left became people like, as an example, not only the anti-Vietnam movement, which of course there would have been no anti-Vietnam movement if North Vietnam was not a communist country. If it had been led by a king, or if it had been a capitalist country, it would have been perfectly okay. That would have been just accepted. But the fact that we could not fight the leftists, because that would have gone against, the world revolution, which they represented. So what you happen is, like, take examples. You have the Weather Underground became the Weathermen, and when their acts of violence ended, did not inspire a revolution. The New Left, inspired by this Marcuse, merged into the Democratic Party, and the New Left has taken over the Democratic Party. So now this third generation New Left leaders that run the Democratic Party in the U.S., they've pushed the reformers, the liberals, to the side. So the liberals are now the fringe, and the New Left, the third generation New Left, run the Democratic Party. So you have things like radical feminism, where the the screaming is for abortion for any reason or no reason at all, right up to birth, and even talking about killing babies right after birth as being something that they should have a right to do. Total rejection of traditional roles. In fact, some feminists even declared in the '60s, even declared that lesbianism was preferable to relations with a man. And then you have the radical environmentalists. You have uh, all the way down to transgender movement today. Not individual people. Don't get me wrong. Not individual people, but the movement, the academic part of it, where you have people. So Marcuse had a tremendous impact, and he is somebody you can rate directly back to World War II and his participation in our government. I just thought it was very interesting. So now we have Germany and Japan, two mighty brutes intent on racial domination of the world, completely and utterly defeated. They are occupied and prostrate before the nations of the world they tried to enslave. One would think that a new and wonderful world was dawning, and all of the bad stuff of the old world, the remnants of the 19th century, had been dealt with. But a new menace has been identified. Now, Stalin in the Soviet Russia, they had elections, but they were kind of a joke, because their democracy is democracy by proxy, where you have the rule of the elites, and the people were just to give a rubber stamp by voting and acknowledging their authority. And he gave a speech, an election speech. It's considered to be the beginning of the Cold War on February 9, 1945. Interestingly enough, I've read that one of the mottos for that election was peace, jobs, and democracy. So that's kind of ironic. So when somebody talks about democracy today, to see where they come from with that. Their definition of democracy may be something totally different than yours. Um, so, and one source says, in an election speech of February 9th, the Soviet dictator announced that Marxist-Leninist dogma remained valid for the unevenness of development of the capitalist countries could lead to violent disturbance and the consequent splitting of the capitalist world into two camps and the war between them. War was inevitable as long as capitalism existed. The Soviet people must prepare themselves for a replay of the 1930s by developing basic industry instead of consumer goods, and in all, making enormous sacrifices demanded in 3 5-year plans, I should think, if not more. Now, there would be no peace, internally or externally. These words profoundly affected Washington, our capital. Supreme Court Justice William Douglas, one of the reigning American liberals, believed that Stalin's speech meant the declaration of World War III. And in fact, it is considered the beginning of the Cold War. Now, there's a couple other events and speeches and documents that we need to discuss, which we will, along with events. So we'll talk about that next time. And I just hope there is a link I just want you to understand the reason for this today. I want you to understand there is a link between the Marxist and leftists of World War II and what is happening right now, whatever you believe about it. I mean, you may think what's happening right now is wonderful, and way it should be. Fine. But you understand, this is not done in a vacuum. There is a link, a progressive link, all the way back to World War II, molding and shaping our culture and our country to move in certain directions. Yes, there is a backlash today. I don't know if it will have bear any fruit or not. But my point being is, I hope you'll study this, come to your own conclusions. I'll post some links of information that really helped me to wrap my mind around it in the comments, and then I look forward to talking to you again real soon, and we'll go on to some other documents and events. Thank you.